Can you guys hear me okay? Great.
Council will call the meeting order. For the record, it is July 11th, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. We'll begin this afternoon's work session with roll call attendance.
Councilwoman Strader,
Here?
Councilman Overton,
Here.
Councilman Hoagland,
Here.
Councilman Borton.
Here.
Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
to go into the adoption of the agenda for our consent agenda, we've had a request to remove items 15 and 16, and we'll move those down to items moved from the consent agenda, so they'll not be on the consent agenda. But we will hear them in order. We talked about, do we do them after 21, but I think we can just take care of those in a timely fashion to not impact anything else. So with that change noted, Mr. Mayor, I move adoption of the agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is, or the agenda is adopted. Next up is the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move approval of the consent agenda and for the mayor to sign and the clerk to attest, with the exception of items number 15 and 16, which will be moved off the consent agenda for separate consideration.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. So next we'll move on to items 15 and 16, which were removed from the consent agenda. First up will be item 15.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
maybe it would make sense just to make a quick comment. I was the person that requested that we remove the items from the consent agenda. So, I reviewed the agreements, and I also reviewed the photographs of the 5G small cell examples of what those would look like. I don't agree with how they look aesthetically. And I also have an issue because I feel like our agreement authorizes the use of our streetlights for these cell towers, but it doesn't really restrict their appearance, their location, with the exception of referring to the UDC. And from speaking with legal, the UDC is not very descriptive on how to handle them. And so I think it would make more sense to take a look at updating our UDC. And in the meantime, certainly the providers have the ability to continue to use all of the ACHD right of way and the intersections as they have been. So I don't think it would be too restrictive to take a look at that a little bit more. So I just wasn't ready to approve it on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
a question on that concern. Was there any direction from legal in that discussion that says there's an opportunity to add language to it, or to provide some clarity on design elements, or any suggestions that might address the concerns you've raised?
For legal, but I didn't feel that there was an opportunity to address those concerns at this point. But
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Strader and Borton. So in speaking with planning, I mean, we already have an existing UDC code that they're already having to comply with on aesthetics and things like that. Could they be better? Yeah, I think they've been working with my staff and planning are working on that as another iteration for the UDC, but we've been applying the UDC now on the requests that are being made in commercial areas. So certainly that's an ongoing conversation, but it didn't feel to us or to planning that it was imperative to do that before this master agreement would be in place, but it's certainly your folks' call.
Mayor, one other follow-up question on that.
Councilman Borton.
Bill, is the obligation for these to meet the requirements of the UDC, is it the requirements of the UDC as it exists at the time of each installation, or are they somehow grandfathered into its current status today?
It would be a new application, Councilman Wharton, so it would be whatever the existing UDC requirements are at the time they apply, because it's an individual
Okay.
application each time.
Okay, so if there's changes to our UDC that provides some more specifics on design parameters, a lot of these licensees will be subject to and have to comply with that.
The existing ones obviously would remain because they've already been permitted, but anything, a new application and the
Right.
standards have changed, those would be what they would apply.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, it sounds like, so if we have that discussion and things change, those would apply and move forward. So I don't have an issue with approving the master license agreement right now and then having those discussions and seeing if there needs to be any changes. So I would move that we approve the master license agreement between the City of Meridian and Crown Castle Fiber LLC for the use of license or property in connection with the operation of wireless network.
I have a motion, a second, to approve what was consent item number 15. Is there discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
a couple quick things. I appreciate Councilwoman Strader bringing it up and that review, pulling it for this discussion is helpful. And sound like unless there's concern from council that planning staff this is on the UDC update radar to see what language, if any, that might be helpful before the horse is out of the barn too far for design elements. That'll happen sooner rather than later, I presume. Am I correct?
Mr. Mayor, members of the Councilman Wharton, I'm not sure what the timing is, but I'll talk with planning.
Okay. Just make sure it's on the radar. Thanks.
Is there further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, I think it's just the horse getting out of the barn is my concern. So my comment was going to be either way, whether it's approved tonight or not, just that we have, focus on the UDC updates for this. I would not want to walk out my front door and see one of these next to my house. So I'm just trying to kind of come at it from a practical level of, the aesthetics and kind of what they look like and understand, the density of how many can be located in a neighborhood, et cetera. So some of those were my concerns and I felt like didn't get addressed because I just received the sort of depictions of them yesterday that I had been asking for. So understood if it gets approved tonight, I'm sure we'll tackle it either way, but it does really seem like something that we're going to need to focus on.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, if not, clerk call the roll. Or do you want a voice vote? Council like a voice vote or roll call?
I'm going to vote no, so.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it 3-1.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
item 16 is basically the very same thing with just a different provider name on there. So I move approval of the master license agreement between the City of Meridian and Verizon Wireless for the use of licensor property in connection with the operation of a wireless network. Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve what was consent agenda item 16. Is there discussion on this topic? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it 3-1, and the items are agreed to. Thank you. And while I don't see anybody from community development here, I'm sure legal will be conveying that part of the conversation or myself when I meet with them. So, okay. With that, we will move on to our department commission reports. First item up is item 21, which is Gowan Thunder Air Show and open house presentation. Jake, do you want to introduce, or we'll just like to have Lieutenant Colonel come up and take the mic? All right, and we're joined tonight by Lieutenant Colonel Tony Rocco Vincelli. So the stage is yours. And if you can just state your name and address and speak into a mic so those remote can hear you well.
Roger that. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and share some information with you today. My name again is Tony Vincelli. I'm a 26-year member of the military, served at Gowan Field in Boise for about 23 years now. And I'm fortunate enough to be the director for Gowan Thunder 2023. I just wanted to spend a few minutes just to share some information about the air show and our event with you, and certainly be available to answer any questions. Is there slides? Am I able to? I can't see them, so I just want to make sure. Okay, perfect. As long as you can see them, that's all that really matters. I've got paper copies right here. So Gowan Thunder, first of all, were any of you able to attend the 2017 event, our first air show that we had in 2017? Okay, so this might be new to many of you, and that's great. So Gowan Thunder is a joint military open house and air show event. So what we mean by joint is that it is a Army, National Guard, and Air National Guard event. Responsibilities are shared, expenses are shared. Everything is jointly planned between those two agencies. And we also have a nonprofit foundation on the installation in Boise called the MWR program that helps service members and families with various resilience activities, recreational programs, things for children and families. So it's an outstanding organization that we have internally at Gowan Field. Our mission and vision is obviously to host a free family-friendly event in the community, something that's extremely unique. We're only going to be doing it about once every 4 years in the Treasure Valley area. And we want to do that primarily to say thank you to the citizens of the Treasure Valley and all of Idaho for all of their support. We have a lot of friends in the National Guard, and we just want to take an opportunity to spend some time with the community and thank them for their support. We also want to celebrate some achievements in the military and in aviation, and probably most near and dear to my heart is to inspire patriotism and ignite the imagination of the next generation. And I'll talk about how we're planning to do that. Next slide. All right. So in 2017, we actually were pretty surprised with the attendance that we had. We had close to 125,000 people there over the 2 days. About 65 on Saturday of that weekend and 60,000 on Sunday. You can see the breakout, and that's just an estimate, but we did do some sample polling, about 500 or so folks, and that's the percentages that we came up with. So we really good representation from the city of Meridian, along with the other communities across the valley. We're expecting an even bigger event this year. It's going to be over 150,000, and we base that off of a couple of things. Number one, nationally, air shows are beating attendance projections. I think people are kind of tired of being inside the house. They want to get out and be out in the community, and certainly a free family event like this, I think will draw big crowds. We do have some other events that we're competing with that weekend. The Albertsons Boise Open is that weekend, as is the final weekend of the Western Idaho Fair. But I think that we can share the audience with those other events and expect a great turnout. And as you can see there, our economic impact as assessed by the Boise Convention and Visitors Bureau is just short of $5 million. So that's a really great thing for area businesses and area nonprofits as well. Let's see. There we go. All right, so leading the show this year is going to be the Thunderbirds. If you've ever been to an air show before, you know about the Thunderbirds. Just a really great performance team, and certainly draws a lot of crowds. We're also going to have various military performers and civilian performers there as well. I won't detail all of them, but you can see the list there. It's pretty extensive. It's going to be about a 6-hour show with a couple of short intermissions on both Saturday and Sunday, and then we're going to have a whole variety of things going on the showgrounds ramp, and I'll show you a map of that here in just a second. All right, so this is just kind of my version of what the ramp looks like. I'll show you what it actually looks like on the next slide. But folks will park at parking areas within a few miles of of Gowan Field and then be bussed onto the field. And then once they enter, they're going to be able to freely walk the ramp and see the performances once they start at about 11 o'clock on both Saturday and Sunday. We're expecting, we are planning for up to 160 buses to bus all of the folks because what we want to have happen is we want to make sure that people have a great time and then are able to leave in a timely manner. We don't want them having to hang out for an hour or two waiting for a bus to get them back to their cars. So we're making every effort to ensure that that wait time is going to be as short as possible. Here's what the ramp actually looks like. And this is still very tentative, but you don't see any airplanes on the ramp yet. Trust me, there will be many airplanes and other exhibits on the showgrounds ramp there, but that's kind of how it's oriented in that east ramp. So straight up is north. And so that ramp to the east is going to be prime viewing area for the performances that are happening. Any questions on the layout of this? Well, probably have several questions. You can ask those at any point if you have questions. Next slide here. Our budget is just over $750,000 this year. So it's quite expensive when you factor in all of the travel for the performers, the fuel that goes into the aircraft, all of the hospitality and arranging for water and beverages and food and all that sort of thing. It gets the bills add up quickly. So we do rely quite heavily on sponsorships. About a third of the cost is covered by the military, and the rest must come through sponsorships and then through our ticket sales and vendor sales. And that's how we're planning to pay the bills. And then anything that's left over will be put into a fund to fund to help partially fund our next air show, which we're planning for in 2027. As you can see, the Guard is a vital member of the community and of the state. Total economic impact is just over $600 million. And, I'm happy to say I'm a Meridian resident as well, and 534 of us, plus our families currently reside in Meridian. So certainly any support that you provide to this event will not be lost on those of us that are citizens of this great city. And then, there's multiple ways that we're asking people to support. Specifically for you, though, I see a few different potential, and I spoke with Jacob Clough and David Miles about this, but we are really concerned, or not concerned, we're really interested and excited about the STEM Expo Center, which is going to be really an opportunity for kids to come in and get hands-on with a lot of different exhibits. And we're enlisting the support of Boise State University, some other universities as well, and area businesses to provide exhibits for the kids to kind of get in there and get excited about science, technology, engineering, and math. That the location of that expo center is also pretty advantageous because it happens to be shaded and it'll be cool, or at least cooler than being out on the ramp in late August. So I think it'll be a well-attended venue on the air show ramp. And then I mentioned buses earlier. And this may just be nothing more than public awareness, but we are looking for qualified bus drivers, and we are certainly enlisting the support of area bus companies, because 160 buses, as you can imagine, with drivers is quite expensive. In fact, it's over $150,000 of our budget comes from busing alone. So anything that you can do to help us in that regard, again, just maybe reaching out to bus companies and pledging your support to the event and asking them to support us by providing those buses and drivers at as reasonable of a cost as possible. That would be certainly appreciated. And then, of course, you got to pay the bills. So cash sponsorship is always welcome to the extent that you are comfortable and want to support the event. With that, I'm kind of at the end of my slideshow. So if there are any questions or any other information that I can provide, I'd be happy to do it at this time.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. Council, any questions? And I'm seeing no questions. I know this was an item that the city of Meridian did financially support 4 years ago. I believe it was either with a $5,000 or $10,000 donation in support of the STEM center busing. And I think it was the time it was to bus Meridian students to participate in the STEM activities on Friday. Is that still something that is going to exist in the current scenario?
100%. That STEM Expo Center will be open all 3 days. It is, the timing this time around is a little bit of a challenge just because the kids are getting just back into school, right? So unfortunately, we were at the mercy of the Thunderbirds schedule when they were available, and late August was about all we could do this year. So we're going to make lemonade out of lemons and go with it. But obviously, if any kids want to get out of school and attend, they are more than welcome on Friday, but obviously Saturday and Sunday, we expect a good amount of kids to come out and participate at the STEM Center.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
Lieutenant Colonel, thank you for presentation. So it is a great event. I know community members really enjoy it. So is there particular sponsorship levels do you have? Is that on your website? We can go.
It is, yes, sir. So if you go to gowanthunder.org and then click on the sponsors button, scroll down half the page, there's a link to view the whole packet. I can briefly summarize it. So sponsorship started, our 1-star sponsorship starts at $3,500, and then we have 2-star at $5,000 and the 3-star at $10,000. And there's, there's various benefits that go along with that. And we tailor that more towards private companies, who want to entertain clients or bring business associates out. For city officials, you're obviously welcome to attend the TAGS tent, and you could, any tickets that we provide to the city, you could pass out to your employees or to whomever you feel is wanting, needing those tickets. But that's just kind of how we structure the different levels of sponsorship.
Mr. Mayor, one last question.
Councilman Hoagland.
What's the deadline? When you'd like to have a decision by?
Really, at any point is fine. We are pressing forward full steam ahead. We don't see any issues that are going to prevent us from having this event successfully, other than busing, but we have a solution there. We're going to actually train a lot of our soldiers and airmen to drive the buses ourselves, and actually that'll cut down on some costs as well. So, but to answer your question, sir, at any point, really, we're not under a time crunch. Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Colonel, thank you for a great presentation. I was looking down while you were talking because I probably sent it out to about a dozen people.
I appreciate
Make sure
that.
we get the word out.
Absolutely.
Because I'm
Absolutely.
looking forward to this event. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, council, I don't want to be okay, I'm going to do the hard ask right now, just to make sure that this technically is the last day we can do budget amendments in this year. This is not a budgeted item within our current budget. So if council is interested in supporting this financially, I feel like unless someone else knows another way to pay for it, that's not as part of our budget. If the city's interested in it, we probably need to make a motion today. And I don't even know how that works if you don't have the official budget amendment form in front of you, but I've been told we can't do budget amendments next week because we have to publish the numbers for the year. So I'll leave that right there for any direction or non-direction.
And if it'd be better if I exited the room and you guys discussed it, that is totally up to you, sir.
I don't think that's necessary. They often make fun conversation decisions with other people in the room who sometimes they like what they do and sometimes they don't. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I'm comfortable for certain continuing to support this event in a manner which we've done in prior years. I'd love to get it on the radar in anticipation of continued support in future years, so it fits into our budget discussions. But the mechanics of how we do it, in light of the timing, if it's funded and the funds are delivered in the next fiscal year, because that's what it takes, and then so be it. We'd still want to make sure we can provide the financial assistance.
And our CFO just showed up.
Fantastic.
So he can at least maybe weigh in on this topic.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this event is occurring confirmed before October 1 of this calendar year. So with that, that is a fiscal 23 item. So fiscal 24, we don't need to worry about. So the question is, where do we have the money in this year's budget? Sorry, I was running down the hallway. So in this case, we don't need a budget amendment per se. You have the spending authority up to a certain amount of dollars. We will have the bandwidth in your budget to make the contribution that you wish, if you wish, to for fiscal 23. So no forms needed. Just give me direction. We can draft up some paperwork. Or we can draft up the paperwork for you, get the contract signed up, procurement, legal. You just tell me how much you would like us to write up a contract, and we'll make sure we have the funds available for fiscal 23 to satisfy your needs.
Perfect. So we don't need spending authority because we have spending authority, which is under most budget amendments. We have funds left over from savings of some sort, someplace likely police personnel. There's always a little bit of extra there. We know that. So you want a week to think about it and come back next week since we don't need this specific time?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
No, I mean, we could do that. There's not a rush to do it, but I'm in agreement with Councilman Borton's proposal that, we do it what we did before. I think that was a good amount. I believe it was 10,000. Is that what anybody recall?
It's either 5 or 10. I don't recall.
And maybe we can take a look at that and make a decision next week or something soon enough to let you know where we're coming down on. And since we don't need any forms or anything officially done today, we might be okay with that. So
What I'll do is I'll share the packet.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I do have some concerns, and just my concerns would be, I think there's probably a huge amount of external events that we could support as a city. And so I think we need to be thoughtful about what we pick and choose. This is a fantastic event to support, but I wouldn't, for example, want us to provide the same level of financial support to this event that we provide to, for example, Dairy Days, which is held within our own city, right? So I just think we need to think through kind of the amount of the contribution and make sure it makes sense. It sounds like when we did it previously, it directly benefited, Meridian students. So if that opportunity is available, so I have a couple concerns I would like to think through.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess you will be hearing from us soon. All right. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this event to the community. So with that, we will move on to item 22, which is fiscal year 2023 budget amendment, the amount of $48,950 for City Hall tenant improvements. Turn this over to Lorelei.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. So the reason I'm bringing this forward is my team is responsible for facilities at City Hall and tenant improvements. So I'll kick it off for us. So this is for a budget amendment for the design of 9 additional hard-walled offices in City Hall. So 6 of those would be in the fire area and 3 of those are in the IT area. So this tenant improvement request does meet the design guidelines that we've put into place for tenant improvements in City Hall. The primary purpose of these is to put supervisors into hard-walled offices so that they can conduct supervisory duties in a private space. Just a reminder, I know it seems like just yesterday, but we moved into this building in 2008. So it's about 15 years old. And so that's, quite a bit of time that's passed and some changes in staffing have pushed this forward. But this tenant improvement would allow us to meet the needs of our staff in several of these areas. And again, this budget amendment is just for the design of those areas so that we could move forward with actually procuring construction costs, but this is just for the design piece.
Thank you, Lorelei. And we do at least have, did I see Dave?
Dave's online, I believe.
Okay, we have the IT and fire chief here for any questions that you have in regards to this, but this is part of the ongoing conversation, especially as we've seen the fire department grow and the challenges that are there. I think we have one person who we don't actually have a physical space for within the department. So this will help alleviate that, but also, try to get people aligned with what expectations we have for positions the best of our abilities. Now, we're always not going to be able to meet that goal, but we do have a way that we can. And we have been putting off TIs. The mayor's office had a TI that we were hoping to do when we did a realignment of personnel, but costs are not what they used to be. And but that's why it's tough to look at these numbers and say this is the cost, but apparently we just don't understand construction to be able to look at these numbers and have faith in them and what takes place to LEED certified building and with air handling and moving things and lighting and everything else. But I'll let you ask any questions you have for the team.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
somebody who sat on the sidelines and watched our police departments get fuller and fuller as we grew. I've witnessed what we've had to do in restructuring bases. Seen what you're looking at. I totally agree that it's needed or past being needed. Not even the last one you're going to have to do in the future. Keep up with the needs of an ever-growing city. Fully support it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
I'm just blown away by the cost, frankly. I mean, the professional services are 50,000, but it looks like that, kind of leads us down the path of $500,000 renovation. It's just a huge amount of money. It seems like for 9 offices, like $60,000 per office. It's like, I'm really sort of struggling. Does that just meet the needs of existing personnel who are supervisors? So do we have 9 supervisors who don't have an office currently? Or is that also meeting future needs? Like, help me understand who, kind of the breakdown of who will be using those offices.
I can speak for, well, never mind. I'm not going to speak for either one of them. Chief or Dave, I'll let you answer.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilwoman Strader. Currently in fire situation, we have 5 supervisors at the division chief level that are in cubicles and they do not have an office with a door. We have a vacancy for a division chief of training position that we have been unable to fill. But if that person were to come to the Meridian Fire Department tomorrow, we do not in fact have an office available for that person or a cubicle for them to sit in. We have additional cubicles, which we have 3 people. In one instance, we have 1 cubicle that is shared by 3 people, but those aren't supervisors. And so the ask with TI is for the division chiefs. And in fact, one of our deputy chiefs, the deputy chief of operation, is in a cubicle and is in dire need of a private place to have confidential executive level discussions, conversations with members of staff, members of the city, surrounding agencies, as well as members of the organization. So it's, I think to Councilman Overton's point, it's overdue. So does that help, ma'am?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
I'm going to push you a little bit on it because I think it's just healthy for everybody to be challenged on it. Why not have a hotel desk concept where we have supervisors able to book, a private conference room, maybe 1 or 2 are sharing it and can have those, like how many, just challenging it a little bit, like how many confidential conversations are needing to happen in a day? Because I don't know, I used to work on a trading floor where we used to share offices for those kinds of conversations, and it really wasn't an issue.
Councilwoman Strader, fair question. I don't really know where to look, so I'm just going to look at your seat because I'm staring down. Fair question, and that's definitely an innovative idea that I think that we could look at. To put a number value on the number of conversations that happen is kind of challenging. Oftentimes they're spontaneous, other times they are booked or scheduled. There are also, with the advent of Teams and Zoom meetings and stuff, when you have 3 people on different Zoom calls or a phone call in a narrow hallway with 3 people, it's a bit of a distraction. We have used some adaptive technology where people are wearing headsets in their workspaces. We've thought about putting up shower curtains just to kind of isolate so that people can feel a sense of a little bit of privacy. But to put a number on how many private conversations need to take place or do take place in a day, in one day maybe it's 3, and the next day it's 10, and then third day it's 0. So I don't really have a definitive answer on that one for you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
I understand. And I'm sorry, you can't see me. It must be weird. I'm like a little voice looming above you. I don't mean to do that. So if I were to make a suggestion, my concern would be we're gonna do this $500,000 build out, and every supervisor gets an office, but that really doesn't set us up going forward, right? If every supervisor has to have an office. And so what I would suggest for the team, as looking at the renovation, is there is a concept where you can have these kind of, they're like small booths and they're soundproof where people can book them. And it's kind of like a hotel desk that you can book. So a private conference room, and just making that available to city employees generally to have confidential conversations. So, we could build out some offices for supervisors. It makes sense to me that we need to do that as part of the renovation, but think a little bit about, shared spaces that could be used for confidential conversations so that we're not just constantly building offices every time we hire a new supervisor, because we're going to run out of space. And it seems like we need a concept that's going to be a little more scalable.
And what we've tried to your point, we've tried to put into what is the appropriate level for each department. Is it okay for some departments to have supervisors or not, or to treat our different employees equally? And so we try to come up with a proposal that, size of space, those elements through that process. And this is one of those things. To your point, that's what IT is currently doing with their 3 supervisors. They have a conference room across the hallway that they go and utilize for these conversations. Fire does have a small conference room or a large conference room that they can use for these conversations. And the costs are, this has been my biggest struggle. You can ask the team. I've been struggling with all of this because I don't believe the numbers. I cannot personally believe that these are the real costs to do what we're talking about doing. It blows my mind, just from a very frank standpoint. But I feel like if we don't proof up some of this, then we'll never know. And part of the conversation that we're not having today is we do want to look at this at a larger on say, for example, the entire 3rd floor, or looking at different segments to help have these larger conversations. I've seen the booths you talk about. C² Social has these awesome booths that you can use that are phone booths. They're not, you can't put 2 people in them, but to do a private meeting, I think that those are things that maybe are in addition to the cubicles that exist, so people can step into them. So I don't know what the final answer is, but engaging an architect is the way to try to help define some of this. And yeah, I struggle with the costs every time I look at TIs in this building, and that's why we put off TIs in the mayor's office for the last 2 years, because I just couldn't stomach the cost of bringing stuff forward. But the fire department does seem to be in a little bit different situation, where we don't have enough space, and part of this is the space plan. That entire, if I'm correct, does this get the entire fire department suite space planned or just the offices? So this is just for the offices, but you would likely see a budget amendment in 2024 that could do the entire fire space, but we didn't have a good number for you. And I know council doesn't like things that aren't a good number. So I could only bring forward a good number for you today because the architects couldn't get us the real number for the rest to do the entire fire department in a timely fashion, for example. So I'm trying to respect the budget timeframes that we're under, council's desire to have real costs and not guesstimates where we can, but at the same time, move the conversation forward if we can. And if council says no, then we'll figure out stuff over the next 5 months or 4 months at least, and see if we can come up with a better approach or cost. But the costs are a struggle for me every time I have the conversation over TI. Just ask anybody on the team.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
sorry, and then I'll stop talking because I feel like I'm the only one right now, but I would feel better about it if the plan was, we have agreement, every director should have an office. And, every, I don't know, 2 supervisors, 3 supervisors, whatever the metric is, should have access to, a department level private conference room to have those conversations. I'm kind of hoping that out of the process, if we had kind of commitment to look at shared spaces as part of this, I would feel a little bit better about it. I'm okay with the 50,000 to study it, but I hope that we could look at shared spaces as part of the work. It's the $500,000 that I'm really choking on and having a really hard time with. So just like you are, so.
And we can certainly, as part of the design process, ask them for some cost estimates for some of those shared spaces. And, but it would likely be, if we're talking about building walled conference rooms, it's going to be in that similar price. Similar, to what the mayor shared. We do our best getting price estimates. However, without a bid set or drawings, contractors have a really hard time giving us a price estimate. So we've reached out, we've utilized resources, and we keep getting these ballpark numbers. And so really we're kind of at that sticking point of, we have to at least get through the design to be able to come back to you guys and go out to bid, to be able to come back to you guys with a real construction budget. So we definitely have a stopgap in place where we can have more conversation about the actual construction, but we need to get through the design phase.
Yeah, we won't get to any construction until you can't even do a budget amendment till October in that regard. So there'll definitely have to be more conversation about what is found or done and whatnot. And when we built out the second floor space that Congressman's office currently is, I think that was a $90,000 TI for the entire space in 2009. That blows my mind when we are talking about this. And I've offered to come in and do the demo work myself, but they say we're not allowed to do that. I'm serious. I'm like, we can't demo, we can't do anything to reduce the cost. And the answer is no, we're not allowed to. I don't understand it. But I suppose if I run through a wall on accident, does that count? So, sorry.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, I think we all agree it is perplexing about the cost. I think we can look for other options that might help, we hope, save some dollars, but we have to begin this first step. So I would move that we approve fiscal year 2023 budget amendment in the amount of $48,950 for City Hall tenant improvements.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the budget amendment. Is there further discussion? If not, clerk, call the roll.
Strader,
Was that
Or-
an aye?
I
Overton.
Aye.
Borton,
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to, and we hope we can bring costs and efficiencies down. Just put it that way. Okay. With that, we'll move on to item 23, Public Works, Cost of Service Study Survey and Proposed Fiscal Year 2024 Water and Sewer Fees.
All All right, well, we're working on pulling up some slides. So my presentation is twofold for you tonight. The first is to discuss the results of our cost of service study. And then the second is to give you guys the proposal for the water and sewer utility rate increase for FY24. So the first question is, what is a cost of service study? So essentially, we worked in 2022 with FCS. They're a national consultant that has expertise in municipal rates. We worked with the city's finance team and the Public Works Department to essentially look at our projected revenues, our projected expenses, make sure that our rate structures are legally defensible, and then make sure that we're capturing and allocating costs fairly. So one of the things that was really important for us to achieve with this was the assessment fee. You may have heard of the Loomis method. It was a case law that happened in Idaho related to assessments, and make sure that our assessment fees lined up with the way that that case concluded. And then we also had the group look at a couple of special interest topics related to finance, but they were, what would it look like if we developed customer classes in Meridian? So currently all customers, whether you're residential, business, sprinklers, everybody is charged the same rate structure. What would it look like if we split the funds? So currently today, we just have the enterprise fund, and should we split that into a water fund and a sewer fund? And then our third one was, do we need to start looking at funding significant infrastructure replacements? So you may hear on the news sometimes that, infrastructure is failing around the US. Do we need to start saving for huge future water and sewer line replacements? The good news on that one is our system is still very new and very young, and the consultant did not think that we needed to start investing in that significantly today. Okay, so slide 2, please. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see those because I can't up here. But so what did the cost of service study show us? Well, the good news is the enterprise fund is healthy. That's great news for us, but we will likely need rate increases to maintain that over the next period. Part of that is just the cost of keeping up with inflationary costs of doing business. It did look at our processes and methodologies for establishing rates and fees and determine that those are also legally sound. Especially after we updated our assessment fees back in 2022 to align with the Loomis method, we are on sound ground as far as our rates and fees. The other thing that was really great is it validated that our city rate model tool is very accurate and a very good predictive tool to show us what revenue is coming in, what expenses are going out, and what potential rate increases could look like. So the cost of service study recommended a few things. So the very first was update our assessment fees. We completed that in November of 2022 because it was the highest priority item. It also recommended that we review and update our rates annually to maintain fund solvency. We did bring you a rate increase in June of 2022 last year, and I am proposing one today. A couple of the other things it recommended was considering a fund split, and it says consider because it's important to know that isn't required, but it is a good financial practice. It also told us to consider looking at changing what fees go into the base rate versus the use rate. So there's some fees or some costs that vary depending on how much water we produce or how much sewer we treat. Some costs are there no matter what we process. And so for stuff that is not volumetric dependent, you could put that on the base. The more costs that you put on the base, the more stable your revenue source can also be. The study also recommended looking at considering customer classes. Again, this is a recommendation, not a requirement. Like I mentioned, currently all of our customers are charged the same way, which is probably okay. So 73% of our customers are residential. So that's the bulk of our customers. One of the things, and we have a plan to look at this, but one of the things is a challenge with our billing software. So the more complex you make your rate structures, the more of an administrative burden it is to split these up, to make sure that you're assessing things the right way. We're unsure if our current billing system is even capable of creating these customer classes. So those are some things we need to look into over the next several years. So our implementation plan for cost of service. I see it now. Do you want me to, if I click on it in here? All right, so our implementation plan. So for FY24, we're coming forward with a rate increase proposal. Also important to know that our 10-year EPA fee sunsets at the end of FY24. The study recommended, as is our finance department and our recommendation, to let that fee sunset. It was a 10-year fee. It did accomplish what it needed to accomplish, but their recommendation is if we need additional revenue because of regulatory requirements, we just build that into our regular rate structure. And then in FY24, we'd also like to evaluate the customer class and the base versus use costs, dig a little bit more into our billing software and really decide if the extra effort is worth, if there's, the administrative effort is worth splitting up those class structures and what that would look like. And we can bring that information forward to you before we make any decisions there. Going forward, FY25, we would recommend we continue every year to evaluate whether we need rate increases. We recommend every 3 years that we look at our assessment fees. And then we'll also proceed in alignment with finance on the enterprise fund split in FY25. Going forward, assessment fees every 3 years, and then reviewing the cost of service study every 5 years, just to make sure that it's kept up to date. So our FY24 rate increase proposal. So we really haven't had many rate increases. In fact, only 2 over the last 10 years. So we had a 2% increase in October of 2014, and we had a 2% increase in June of 2022. We're proposing a 3% increase effective October of 2023. And this would be to both the use and the base of the water and the sewer. What this equates to is about $1.91 per month increase for the average Meridian resident. And we'll talk a little bit about why we need that. So this slide is a little bit busy, but it shows you what our current rates are for the average customer. And it also shows you what our current assessment fees are. This is our enterprise fund internal rate model graph. A couple of things. So the orange line is our total ending fund balance. And our black line is our balance after we take out reserves. So our goal, a couple of things that are really important, is we maintain the save before you spend philosophy. We are currently in a planned spend period. We also think stability of the fund and stability of rate increases is really important. So we don't want to, go back and forth doing huge rate increases, no rate increases. So what you'll see here is there's a pretty significant drawdown in the first few years. And the reason not to panic is we have a couple of really big wastewater projects that we really feel like need to get bid out, so we know the dollar figures. The other thing is this rate model is run with 100% execution. We generally do not achieve that. Our historic is usually around 60. So we're not going to spend all that money as quickly as the model forecasts. So we do feel like we need an adjustment for no other reason to then just keeping up with inflationary pressures. Things like chemicals, electricity, fuel have all gone up immensely. Those are huge costs for our utilities. But both us and the finance department are not significantly concerned on the capital side with that drop. We think it's prudent to ask for this small increase now, see how those projects actually pan out, and then come back to you again next year with additional potential increases if needed. So this is what our model looks like if we implement the rate increase. So you'll see it pushes that line out just a little bit. It still allows us to bid those large projects. This model does take into account the sunsetting of the EPA fee in FY24. And another thing to note, we are very competitive as far as utility rates in the Treasure Valley. So these are rates as they sit today across the Treasure Valley. And it will show you Meridian's rates with where we're today and then with the proposed 3% increase. The reason we can be in this is because of the really careful financial planning that we do with our finance department, and mayor is forecasting our needs for the next period, saving before we spend, and not getting into debt financing really helps us stay at these low levels. However, we also recognize that any rate increase does impact some of our customers. So just wanted to let everybody know that there are a couple of programs that Meridian offers. The first is our Meridian Cares program, which offers up to $100 of financial assistance. We partner with LADA on that, but $100 per year to help pay residents who meet the financial thresholds for their water, sewer, and garbage bills. And then there are other programs that are outside of the city that are available for utility assistance. The Boise School District has a really good resource manual that links you to different programs that can help you with utility bill payments. Just for reference, in FY22, we assisted 81 customers with our CARES program.
Hey, Mayor.
It's important.
Sorry, real quick question. Lorelei, is that $100 a figure that we created, or is it some program cap?
I do not know the answer to that, Todd.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Borton, LADA is the one that's in charge of negotiating or discussing the reimbursement or the funding rates between the customer and LADA itself. We will fund LADA on the back end,
Okay.
but we let them manage that discussion between each individual unique customer situation.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So what our proposed schedule looks like. So we are proposing that we hold a public hearing on August 15th. We would notice that in the next two utility bills that go out, as well as in the newspaper the 2 weeks prior to that. And then hold the public hearing, and assuming that we received approval, we would implement this rate increase on October 1st. So with that, I'll stand for any questions about either the cost of service study or the FY24 increase proposal.
Thank you, Lorelei. Council questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I know it won't be the last time to comment on definitely the rate side of things and others as they come forward. So appreciate it. With that, we're on item 24.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we go into executive session per Idaho Code 74-206A1A.
I have a motion, a second, to go into executive session.
Aye.
Aye.
So I understand we have two members of council on with their, so if you, I think we can take a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move that we come out of executive session.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are out of executive session.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
move we adjourn the work session.
A motion to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it's July 11, 2023 at 6:01 PM. We'll begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Councilwoman Strader,
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Hoagland,
Here.
Councilman Borton,
Here.
Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge. Tonight's community invocation will be delivered by Jennifer Cavanis Williams with the Baha'i Faith. If you all would please take this as a moment of silence or reflection, either one, or join along. Thank you.
Does it matter?
No.
O my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord.
Thank you. Next up is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
I move we adopt the agenda as published.
Second.
A motion, a second to adopt the agenda as published. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is adopted. So first thing we're gonna do is do a proclamation. If I could get the Hawaii High School baseball team to join me at the podium along with their coaches, that'd be great. So council, we're gonna have to get used to Hawaii for the next 2 weeks as we have the baseball team this week and the softball team next week coming in for their state championship. So we really appreciate the fact that you guys are willing to come in during your summer. I'm sure you all are just doing nothing, sitting around playing video games. Hopefully you're doing some good stuff, but we are here to recognize them for their achievement on the field, which is, I know, something that they really look forward to. So what we'll do is read the proclamation. And if each of you can kind of come through, say your position, you're in position with the team. Then we'll let the coach say a few words and do a picture. That work? All right. So whereas being a Hawaii High School baseball player is more than making, pitching, fielding, hitting, and achieving state titles, it is training to build leadership, character, confidence, teamwork, and resilience, all traits needed to succeed on the field, in the classroom, and in the real world. And whereas the hard work and dedication of the Hawaii Storm baseball team and coaches has resulted in the second-year program as back-to-back 5A baseball state champions. And whereas the Storm completed the regular season with a record of 11-1 in conference and 19-2 overall. And whereas the Storm baseball finished the season with a 23-4 record and clinched their second straight Idaho 5A baseball state title. by taking a 5-2 win in the championship game, proving that the team was in it to win it. And whereas the leadership, training, and discipline of their coaches helped all team members to focus their talents, passion, and determination to become a winning team, with each player making valuable contributions to their victory. Therefore, I, Mayor Robert E. Simpson, hereby proclaim July 11, 2023 as Hawaii High School Baseball State Champions Day. The city of Meridian call upon the community to join me in congratulating the Hawaii High Storm on their remarkable athletic achievement and representing Meridian so proudly in the state tournament. So on behalf of the city, congratulations. While I know the mayor of Star likes to claim you, and there may be some of you from Star, we consider you Meridian because that's where your address is. So congratulations.
Pitcher only. Cooper Carlson, pitcher only.
Easton Price, outfield 2025.
Jake Curl, outfield 2023.
Caleb Doty, pitcher 2025.
Xavier McGee, PO, class of 2023. Ryan Burbank, outfield pitcher 2024.
Cole Rollmeyer, shortstop, class of 2023.
Jack Ryan, outfield pitcher 2023.
Hunter Mahaffey, pitcher, infield 2025.
Lucas Skinner, catcher, pitcher, 2024. Keegan Kelly, second base, 2025. Gage Hawes, catcher and third base, 2025.
Coach Stephen Rollmeyer and teacher out of Waihi. Thank you.
I'm not doing the class thing. Russ Wright, teach at the high school and head coach. It would have been nice to get all of our guys. Obviously, we got as many as we could get here tonight. We've got a young team playing tonight. And so some of our coaches are there working, but probably the most important thing, all the stuff that they read about this group, they really live it. It's a wonderful group to work with. So proud of them. Great kids. I would take them all as my sons. So we appreciate it. Thank you for the honor.
And for those that aren't here, we do have another proclamation which has everybody's names on it that will be entered into the record for those that weren't here. So in case they ever want to come back and look at city minutes, they'll find them. So you wouldn't mind joining me up here? We'll do a quick picture. Okay, with that, Madam Clerk, we have anyone signed up under future meeting topics?
Mr. Mayor, there is not.
Okay, then we will go on to our action items this evening. Item 2 is a public hearing for Julia subdivision H 2023-0003. Open this public hearing with comments from staff. Sonia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Let me get the presentation up here. The first applications before you tonight are a request for annexation and zoning and a preliminary plat. This site is an enclave consisting of 2.77 acres of land. It's zoned RUT in Ada County, and it's located on the west side of North Black Cat Road, midway between Ustick Road and Cherry Lane at 2435 North Black Cat Road. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation is medium density residential, which calls for 3 to 8 dwelling units per acre. The applicant is proposing to annex 2.77 acres of land with an R8 zoning district for the development of 10 single-family residential detached homes at a gross density of 3.61 units per acre, consistent with the medium density residential future land use designation. A preliminary plat is proposed consisting of 10 building lots and 5 common lots on 2.77 acres of land. Proposed building lots range in size from 4,151 square feet to 12,671 square feet. There is an existing home that is proposed to remain on lot 4. All the other structures are proposed to be removed. There is an existing driveway access via Black Cat Road for the existing home that are proposed to be removed. Access will be provided via the extension of Julia Avenue at the northern boundary of the site. Another driveway exists for irrigation district access that will remain along the southern boundary of the site. A 25-foot wide buffer is required along Black Cat Road, which is listed in the CIP to be widened from 2 lanes to 3 to 5 lanes between 2031 and 2035. Because the site is below 5 acres in size, common open space and site amenities are not required. However, the applicant is proposing 0.59 of an acre of common open space, consisting of street buffer, open space with pathways and a storm drainage area as shown. Sky Pilot Drain exists on the adjacent property to the west and is piped and is open on the subject property along the southern boundary of the site and is required to be piped with development. The drain lies within a 100-foot wide easement, 50 feet each side measured from center line. All of the lots along the western and southern boundaries of the site encroach within this easement. Nampa Meridian Irrigation District has stated they will consider encroachments within the outer 20 feet of the easement with a license agreement similar to what they approved with the adjacent development to the west, Trish's Crossing. No buildings or trees would be allowed in the inner 30 feet of the easement area, but lawn and fences could be allowed. The UDC requires irrigation easements wider than 10 feet to be included in a common lot that is a minimum of 20 feet wide outside of a fenced area unless modified by city council at a public hearing with notice to surrounding property owners. The width of the easement encroachment on this site is approximately 27 feet. The applicant is requesting council approval for the easement to be located on buildable and common lots. That's lots 7, 9 through 12, and 15, rather than a common lot. If the irrigation district approves an encroachment agreement as anticipated, there will only be approximately 7 feet where no buildings or trees would be allowed. For this reason, staff is supportive of the applicant's request. Several conceptual building elevations of 1-story homes with a bonus room over the garage were submitted as shown. Building materials consist of a variety of siding, some with stone and brick veneer accents. As a provision of the development agreement, staff recommends all homes include brick and stone veneer accents on the street facing elevations. The existing home is proposed to be renovated and reoriented to take access from the internal street rather than Black Cat Road. A new 2-car garage will be constructed accessible from the internal street from which access is provided for that home. Due to concerns pertaining to the height of the homes and related privacy issues expressed during the neighborhood meeting with the original developer, the current developer has agreed to a provision in the development agreement that limits all homes to a 1-story in height with a bonus room above the garage with all windows facing the front of the lots. The commission did recommend approval of these applications. Go through a summary of the commission public hearing. There was only one person, the applicant, Bruce Hessing, that testified in favor of the application. There was no written testimony or any other commenters on the application. The commission was in general support of the proposed infill project. The commission did not make any changes to the staff recommendation. The only outstanding issue for council tonight is, as I mentioned, the applicant is requesting council approval for the irrigation district easement for the Sky Pilot drain to be located on building and common lots rather than a separate common lot as allowed by the UDC with council approval. No written testimony has been submitted since the commission hearing. The applicant is here to present testimony tonight. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. Council, any questions for staff? Okay, then would the applicant like to come forward?
Bruce Hessing, 2338 West Boulder Bar Drive, Meridian. These are hard to do, these little infills. I take pride in doing them. I like turning weed patches into houses. Been doing this for about 30 years. It's a good little project. I think it'll fit in there very well. Tanya is amazing. She did it best.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
just a comment, sir, if you could just speak into the microphone a bit more. Thank you.
I will do that.
All right, thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do you have anyone on this item to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, there is none.
Okay, is there anybody present or online that would like to provide testimony on this application? If you would like to come forward. Say your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Alex Nutman. I reside at 2540 North Julia Place. I just wanted to say I'm in favor of it. I'm a direct neighbor and I think this infill project looks well thought out and will be a great asset to our community.
Excellent, thank you. Council, any questions? Appreciate it. Okay.
Anna Orem, 2584 North Julia Avenue. I live right next to this. I am in favor of it, but I don't know if this is the place to ask about this. I'm nervous, sorry.
You're doing great.
The first discussion that we had with the original developer, he had mentioned replacement of the fence along, like, because we live right on Julia where they're going to extend the road. So he had mentioned replacement of the fence and removal of trees that were impeding that fence and actually on the side of the development property, as well as my property and our neighbors across Julia from us. I didn't know if that could be included in this officially.
We can ask the developer to respond to that question. When is your time to come up afterwards?
Okay, sorry. I think other than that, we are not opposed to it. We're in favor of it. We would just like to see those original things that were discussed upheld. And I know it's not the same developer, but he's holding true to single story and some of that stuff as well. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Okay. Is there anybody else that'd like to provide testimony on this item, either in person or online? Or online, you can use the raise your hand feature. Seeing no one come forward, the applicant would like to come forward for final comments and address that question.
Yes, if I'd have had a chance to take a look at that on site, I'm sure I could respond not so vaguely, but it would depend on where those trees are. A lot of times when they're right up against the fence, we know the root patterns of trees, they go under into backyards and it causes issues. And I'd be glad to look at that with her if I could get addresses or contact information. Fencing wise, we're big on replacing old fencing, but I'm not sure how old that fence is in there. That's a fairly recent subdivision, relatively speaking, if you're my age. But yeah, we always do that. We'll look at that. We try to be good neighbors and that's our position.
Okay. Council, any additional questions for the applicant? All right. Seeing none. Do I have direction from council on how you'd like to proceed?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
on you. Do you need to have us give approval for the irrigation district easement as part of the motion?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yes, please. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
seeing no other public comment, I move. Those are public comments.
Second the motion.
We have a motion second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I'd like to make a motion that after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H 2023-0003 as presented in staff report for the hearing date of July 11, 2023, including the approval for the irrigation district easement for the Sky Pilot drain to be located on building and common lots rather than in a separate common lot as allowed by UDC 11-3A-6E.
Second the motion.
Have a motion and a second. Do I have discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
just to the point of the request that Mr. Hessing will go ahead and look at the tree issue and the fencing issue and hopefully we'll come to agreement that what's workable and can make that all work out. So appreciate that, taking a look at that.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Strater,
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Borton,
Aye.
Hoagland.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. And Ms. Gritsu, thank you very much and good luck on the project. And it might be best to get her contact information right now because I don't know that we have anything more than what was said on the record. Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we will move on to item 3, which is public hearing for Cole Valley Christian School pre-K through 12, age 2023-0011. We will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The next application before you tonight is a request for annexation and zoning and a conditional use permit. This site consists of 71.28 acres of land. It's zoned RUT in Ada County and is located at 7080 West McMillan Road on the north side of McMillan, approximately quarter mile west of North McDermott Road. A little history on this property. A property boundary adjustment has been tentatively approved by Ada County for this property for a land swap with the adjacent property owner at the southwest corner of the site, which will allow for the extension of Owyhee Storm Avenue along the project's west boundary. Final approval of the property boundary adjustment is required prior to city council approval of the annexation ordinance. So if council does approve this project tonight, we will be holding off the annexation ordinance approval for a little bit until that gets done. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation is medium density residential, which calls for 3 to 8 dwelling units per acre. And it does have a school designation on it. This site is within the area governed by the field sub-area plan. The applicant is requesting annexation and zoning of 71.28 acres of land with an R15 medium high density residential zoning district. The applicant proposes to develop 48.48 acres of the site with a private education institution in accord with the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. The remaining 23 approximate acre portions of the site at the north and south boundaries are anticipated to be used for future expansion of the school. The property will be used for agricultural purposes in the interim. Because the R8 zoning district is more appropriate zoning district for the medium density residential future land use designation and accommodates the proposed use, staff does recommend an R8 zoning district instead of the proposed R15 district for the subject property, which the applicant is in agreement with, and the commission did recommend approval of. A conditional use permit is proposed for a private education institution on 48.48 acres of land. The use requires conditional use approval because it exceeds 250,000 square feet within a residential district at 259,919 square feet. It includes lighted fields adjoining or within a residential district. It will generate in excess of 1,500 vehicular trips per day at approximately 4,132 trips per day. It takes access from a collector street, i.e. Owyhee Storm Avenue, and there is not a safe separate pedestrian and bikeway access between the neighborhood and the school site. There are actually no adjacent neighborhoods at this time. Whole Valley currently has 2 existing campuses that will be relocated and consolidated into one building on the subject property. The proposed school will be for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade, and the development area will include parking, access drives, open space for student play area, and outside athletic venues. The new facility will serve approximately 1,825 students with the potential to add 12 additional classrooms with future building additions on the south, east, and west wings, totaling 15,300 square feet to serve an additional 300 students. 4 portable classrooms are planned in the future on this site, totaling another 8,400 square feet. Development of the school site will likely occur in 2 phases, as shown on the phasing plan on the right there. That is a revised phasing plan that was submitted late last week, but may occur in 1 phase. If phased, phase 1, that's the pink area shown on the plan, is proposed to consist of all the outside athletic venues except the tennis courts, a portion of the southeast parking lot, public restroom outbuilding, partial construction of Ersatz Road, and partial extension of Owyhee Storm Avenue, and the adjustment and piping of the Creason Lateral. Phase 2, the blue areas on the plan, are proposed to consist of building construction, remaining site development of parking lots, access points, play structures, extension of streets, Owyhee Storm and Ersatz, to the northern boundary of the subject property as half plus 12-foot street sections as required by ACHD, and public utility connections. The gray areas on the plan at the north and southwest corners are future development areas for the school, which will be farmed in the interim. The applicant is requesting council approval to not construct the sidewalks and street buffers along the streets, and that's McMillan, Ersatz, and Owyhee Storm, on the future development areas, the gray areas, until such time as they develop, since they will be farmed in the interim and damage to those improvements would likely occur. 2 accesses are proposed via Owyhee Storm Avenue, and 2 are proposed via Ersatz Place Road. No access is proposed or allowed via McMillan Road. Off-street parking is depicted on the site plan in excess of the minimum standards. A minimum of 742 spaces are required at full build-out, including the portable classrooms and the classroom additions. A total of 843 spaces are proposed, resulting in 101 extra spaces overall. A 10-foot wide detached sidewalk multi-use pathway is proposed within the street buffer along Owyhee Storm Avenue in accord with the pathways master plan. And 5-foot wide detached sidewalks are proposed along McMillan and Ersatz roads. Because ACHD is changing policy to require 10-foot wide multiple use pathways along arterial streets in lieu of on-street bike lanes, and because school children will be using this sidewalk to bike and walk to school, staff recommends a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway is required along McMillan Road as a provision of the development agreement. All utilities except for city sewer are available to the site or in close proximity. Sewer will be provided from the Canada lift station, which is planned to be completed towards the end of fiscal year 2025. The city plans to install a trunk sewer from the lift station to be located near McMillan Road and Canada Road, 1 mile to the east near the intersection of McMillan Road and Star Road as part of the project. The school will need to extend sewer down McMillan Road and Owyhee Storm Avenue to the school campus in accord with the sewer master plan. The city is amenable to allowing a temporary lift station for the sports field and concession and restroom buildings only, which shall be taken offline as part of the construction of the school. Building elevations were submitted as shown for the proposed 2-story school building. Building materials consist of a combination of smooth face and split face masonry in 2 colors and deep ribbed and smooth metal with large expansions of glazing, which should be low maintenance. Raised parapets are proposed for modulation and screening of rooftop mechanical equipment. Because the property is located within the area governed by the field sub-area plan, the general character, design, and identity of the development within this area is required to have a cohesive, modern rural design theme. Because the proposed school doesn't front on McMillan and isn't oriented towards Waihe Storm, and because it's not residential or retail commercial, staff does not recommend the building is required to have a modern rural design theme. However, some of the other thematic design elements that contribute to the desired character of the area should be adhered to, such as lighting, fencing, for example, split rail, landscaping, for example, tall fescues, dry creek materials, wildflowers, street trees, etc. Public art, on-street bike lanes, and/or off-street multi-use pathways, signage, for example, metal roof on sign, etc., as outlined in the plan. The applicant proposes to develop some of the areas adjacent to building entrances with dry stream beds with a mix of rock types, boulders, and plantings in accord with the plan. The detail on the right there shows some examples of those items. In the portions of the site that will not be developed with phase one, a meadow seed mix is proposed to be planted for wildflowers and grass. The applicant has submitted details on fencing, which propose a split rail fence along the southern property line adjacent to McMillan Road and along the Bentley out parcel, and black coated chain link fencing along the east, west, and north property lines for security and safety of the students. City Council should determine if the chain link fencing is appropriate in this area. Details on signage, public art, and other modern rural design themed items have not been submitted as recommended by staff prior to the council hearing, as they have not yet worked out the interior design theme yet. I'll go over a summary of the commission public hearing. Several of the applicants' team testified in favor. Amber Van Oker, LKV Architects, applicant's representative, Sonia Delayden, Kittleson and Associates, Wayne Thowles, LKV Architects. No one testified in opposition. Patrick Nichols commented on the application. A written testimony was received from the applicant's representative, Amber Van Oker, the applicant's representative, excuse me. Key issues of discussion by the commission were as follows. The applicant requests to not be required to construct a Waihe Storm and ersatz and the associated sidewalks and pathways and street buffers to the north property line, just to the northern boundary of the school campus proposed to develop at this time, and the street buffer and pathway along McMillan to be constructed with future development of that area. And lastly, concerns pertaining to traffic and existing congestion in this area and impacts from the proposed development. The commission made the following changes to the staff recommendation. At staff's request, they included a clarification to development agreement provision A11D in section 9 that all street buffers adjacent to public streets also be constructed by the applicant unless already constructed by ITD prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy for the high school building. And the commission required McMillan Road improvements in the extension of Waihe Storm Avenue and ersatz to the northern parcel boundary to be completed either by the applicant or ITD as applicable prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy for the high school building in the second phase of development. The outstanding issues for council tonight, council should determine if the proposed black coated chain link fencing is appropriate in the field's sub area and represents the modern rural design theme as required. And the applicant requests the ability to work with staff further in the future on signage, public art, and other modern rural design theme items for this site in accordance with the field sub area plan. No written testimony has been received since the commission hearing. The applicant is here tonight. Staff will step. Any questions?
Thank you, Sonia. Council, any questions for staff? Okay, would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Amber Van Oker, LKV Architects. My office address is 2400 East Riverwalk in Boise. Anya has taken all my thunder. She did a great presentation. I think covered most of the topics that we kind of need to go over this evening. Coal Valley is exceedingly excited about this project, and we've been working on this for well over a year and a half to get to this point. So this is a milestone for us, and we appreciate this opportunity. There's pretty much most of the folks in the room are part of either our design team or our construction team, which is ESI Construction here in town, and then members of the administration. Alan Hallett, the superintendent, is here, and if there's other additional questions you want to ask him directly, he will be available. I think the main points that we really do want to discuss, the staff report is excellent. We don't have hardly any issues with any of the conditions that have been placed on the application. We do want to visit a little bit more about the extension of the roadways. There's an additional 20 acres associated with that northern piece that if there was a way that we could not extend past our what we have identified as our construction boundary at this point for a Waihe storm. ITD is going to be doing most of the extension of ersatz beyond that. So it's really a Waihe storm that we would like to discuss. It is the intent of Coal Valley to still allow a farmer to farm that 20 acres up until the point that the school would deem it appropriate to develop further. So that's part of the reason. Of course, the other reason is just the economics behind it. Extending a roadway that goes nowhere at this point is difficult on a project of this magnitude, where we're trying to obviously cover a lot of other financial implications. So that's one aspect that we would like to visit a little bit about. The phasing plan that we have included. So Sonia did a really good job of explaining what we have shown here. And this is kind of a fallback. And this is just me wanting to make sure that we present something to you that can be approved this evening. But the blue does indicate extending a Waihe storm all the way to the north parcel line. We would love to be able to stop it right here and go ahead and have that roundabout occur at that location or the cul-de-sac. ITD will be extending ersatz, so that's not as much of a discussion, with the exception that we do not want to, at this point, extend a sidewalk or that landscape buffer or that area of that 20 acres that we're not going to develop at this time. And the same discussion also occurs along McMillan. There's some requirements for the pathways and the landscape buffers. We would like to be able to hold off on that until that parcel is also developed. And, you know, a lot of it is extending, obviously, of these roadways, but extending irrigation, the maintenance of all of that for property that we're not actually developing at this stage. Everything else is still very much in play, and we have agreed with all of the other conditions of approval that have been placed upon this application. Sonia already mentioned the discussion that we would like your approval to not do the split rail fence everywhere on all of our boundaries. And that primarily really is a safety issue. We feel we can do it on the southern boundary lines because we're not as concerned about being able to protect play areas which occur to the north of the building itself and the athletic components. But so we really do request to have a black coated chain link fence solution that is going to be something that the school can maintain. It can really provide that safe perimeter that we need, where a split rail wood fence would be very, very difficult to control this site. And then the other follow-up item would be some of the other details associated with the field's sub-area plan. We just still need to work out some of those details with staff. A lot of it has to do with signage. We want to make sure that not only is our site signage cohesive, but it's also makes sense with what we're going to be doing as far as building signage and interior signage is concerned. So we just need a little bit more time on that. We're not disagreeing with that condition of approval. We just need a little additional time to work out some of those details. The other component, which Sonia mentioned right at the beginning, is that we are still working through some legal documents associated with the land transfer that's occurring with the Dean Bentley parcel to the south. So, you know, we were very successful, in my opinion, to be able to convince an adjacent property owner to let us swap out some land so that we could extend to Waihe Storm. Obviously, that's something that our traffic study really encouraged us to be able to do. The city has been saying that this is obviously something that needs to happen in order to have good access onto this site. So we are still just working through some legal aspects on that. We expect those documents actually any day now to be signed by everybody and then filed with the county. The county has given us approval of that, just waiting for these legal documents. So that is forthcoming. And I think, you know, we've got members of our traffic engineering team also here. If there's very specific details that you need to ask from a traffic engineering perspective, that's over my head. I'd pass it off to her. And then also our landscape architect is here if there's some very specific questions that you may have associated with landscape design. But other than that, I think I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Thanks for your presentation, Amber. A quick question when we talk about the black fence. Can you kind of delineate a little more where that will be going? Is it around primarily the ball fields? And
It'll actually extend along all of Waihe Storm, all of Ersatz, and then the north, you know, what we're calling our construction limit zone, it'll extend there. And then we do have some fencing that is going to secure the football stadium, just to be able to control access to that. And then we do have a little bit of, this mouse is difficult. There's a little bit of fencing that occurs around a preschool play area. But for the most part, that black coated chain link fence is on our perimeter.
Well, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Also, I wanted to check on phase one in the pink you show on Erstat and Waihe Storm. They are extended into the edges of the property. Waihe Storm, you know, shows phase two in blue. Is that for fire access for phase one, secondary access? Is that what
Right.
we're
So
looking at there?
with phase one, we're basically going a full road section to hit our first southern entry point. And then ACHD is requiring us to do a half road section for the remainder. So that's the designation from the pink to the blue on Waihe Storm. The thought being when adjacent parcels are then developed, that developer would come in and finish that other half section of roadway.
Just can follow up on that. Is that phase one requirement to do the half all the way down, or?
No, that would be part of phase two.
Yeah, and I guess the question because I had the same question, why are you doing, what's the rationale for the phase one of a Waihe Storm? Because it connects to nothing at that point in time.
It's fire access so that we have two means.
To a vacant undeveloped parcel of land? Because phase two is not, and that's, it's like nothing connects over to the rest of phase one, at least on this drawing. That's what I was trying to figure out. What's the purpose of the fire access?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, we will only be doing this pink portion under the phase one. This will all still be gravelled out so that if there's an emergency at the football stadium, let's say it's operational at this point, you would still be able to reach.
Okay, so there is a connection back.
Yeah.
Making it, because I was just trying to find out why doesn't it need to be in phase one versus phase two?
I think the fire marshal has told us that he would work around a single access point, but we're kind of looking that needs to occur as soon as we can get that to happen.
Mr. Mayor, that was exactly where I was going with that was, okay, is there going to be a connection? Otherwise, why do that portion of it? And you can work with our fire department on making sure the weights, you have a gravel access point to have that secondary access. And yeah, we can work with you on that certainly, but
Correct.
thank you.
Mayor.
Lieutenant.
Just for the access part, definitely it is a secondary access as long as we're able to get through the gravel section. Hence, if you guys are starting to use the phase one at some point for games or whatever it may be, if the primary entry point is blocked, we need to have a secondary access to render aid or deal with whatever the emergency is. So both fire and police definitely support the secondary access initially in that first phase. And the fencing, I wanted to ask a follow-up question, if that's all right, Mayor. What is the height of this fencing that you're looking at?
It's 6 foot.
Okay, and you're talking about the coated chain link?
Mhm.
And that's just from a safety and security side for schools. That is something that we support as well for the security of the school and the students and staff. So that's something that we would recommend. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
let me jump into that topic. The staff report and Amber, your comments, it makes it look like this is going to have or you're asking to have a 6-foot chain link fence surrounding the entire property on the perimeter. Let me start there. Is that a correct summary?
With the exception of the southern boundary line, so the southern property line that abuts the Bentley parcel, and then this section that would abut McMillan, that's where we're proposing to have that wooden split rail fence, because we're not as concerned about security in those locations. It's really adjacent to the building itself. And then primarily it's the play fields. We just have to really control access from, anyone being able to just walk back onto a play field during the course of, a school day.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I get that. I'm just trying to visualize. I think chain link, even if it's powder coated, is unattractive to say the least. I am envisioning this to be it sounds like it's along Hawaii Storm the whole way, the northern boundary, Erstad on the east the whole way. Is this the new norm that schools are going to get? I know it's not the intent, but it just feels well, I guess it's safe, but it feels kind of prison-like, quite frankly. I know that's certainly not the intent, and I don't make light of safety, but it's really a chain link along 3 full sides of this whole project, 6 feet tall the whole way on the edge.
And it's actually fairly standard. I mean, all of our public schools that we do projects for, West Ada, Boise School District, we're definitely fencing almost all perimeter. We generally don't fence the approach, the front of the school, but those connection points back to, a logical location back to the school building itself to create gated areas. We always have fire access areas, but the schools are fenced. That's certainly normal. What isn't normal is going with a black coated fencing solution. Chain link would be very standard.
So just follow up. Sonia, tell me what the discussion point was then. Your comments in the staff report was for the council to determine whether or not that's appropriate. Is the requirement a blank slate for options here, or is there something that's required, whether it's the split rail and we're being asked to consider to vary from either a recommendation that our staff made or any parameters that help us on this topic?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, Council. This area is located in the Fields sub-area plan, and it does call for modern rural design theme. An example of that is a split rail fence. Staff didn't really feel like the chain link fence is consistent with the modern rural design theme that's desired in this area. So staff is deferring to city council on whether they feel this is appropriate or not for the use and the area. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant.
So with chain link fence, and I think I'm with Councilman Borton, I'm trying to track here as well, exactly where the fence is at, but that fencing is very standard. And again, it heavily falls on safety. And that's what we have to focus on first. On the front of the school, from what I remember from our pre-apps and looking at the files, is the split rail. So visibly from McMillan, it looks nice. It's more aesthetic to the area. But in regards to where we have any types of fields, athletics, and just like we do at Rocky Mountain View, all the high schools, we have that fencing in place for a reason. It's to try to keep out those that we don't want in, and protect those who are actually attending events or at school. So, you know, a split rail fence around the entire school is not something that the police department would support. It creates a lot of safety hazards and concerns for us. So again, the fencing is very standard.
And just as a follow-up question, because again, I'm racking my brain about what schools actually have a fence in the front of them. Is that a requirement of the Fields District that they have to have? Or is that a design choice of the school to put something into the front? Because I don't know that you would need to put in a split rail. I don't know that you need a fence anywhere. It's only where you want them. And then what do you want them to function? Or is there design elements? So that's, yeah, if you want to put a split rail in the front, great.
Well,
But do you need it?
Mr. Mayor, we actually would not want to put the split rail in. That would be a maintenance type of fencing design that we probably wouldn't advocate for. We're just trying to meet some of the requirements of the Fields sub-plan. And, you know, the location of that fence wouldn't necessarily be right adjacent to any entry point. It would be along this property boundary, and this property boundary. So the intent is that if you are on McMillan and you're looking onto the site, you would see that split rail fence. It's going to serve no purpose for the school other than an aesthetics associated with the subfields plan. I mean, if it wasn't a condition of approval, we would not ask to develop that type of fencing on a school site.
It is a condition of approval in the location. I guess that would be a question for staff. Is there a requirement that they have to put a fence in on the front, or is that I understand you want a certain type of fence to meet the intent in other locations, but if council's fine with that, do they have to do it in front? Or who made that determination?
Mr. Mayor, Council, no, it's not a requirement that they provide fencing, but if fencing is provided, fencing should be consistent with the Fields area plan and a modern rural design theme. So if you deem chain link is appropriate, it can certainly be provided along that boundary as well, along McMillan Road. But yeah, it's not a requirement.
I guess as I don't see most schools don't have it in the front. They only have it side and back. I'm not, you don't have to be most schools, but your school downtown has chain link right there on the side to keep it apart from and I know that's an older facility, but yeah. But you don't have it in front of the school. You have it on the side, not in front.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. It would run around the perimeter and then it would connect back to points associated with the building to create that perimeter fencing. We would fence all the way around the football stadium and then back. So, we are creating that containment zone. And obviously any area where we would have emergency access points, that's where we have, Knox box gated gates that are able to be controlled by the police department and the fire department for emergencies. And I think the other thing that I would add is that, this is a unique design. We're dealing with pre-K through 12th graders. And the whole facility really is designed to have kind of a school within a school approach. So we do have separate entrances identified for the younger grades compared to the upper grades. The play fields are being designed so that there is segregation, so to speak, between the grades. And a lot of that is handled with fencing. And it's very important to be able to control that site. Oftentimes you're going to only have a handful of staff members that are going to be out, during a recess period, and they really have got to be able to contain, what is going to be, 1,800 students eventually on this campus. So it's very, very important, the fencing, to be able to have that perimeter.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
just to bring some clarity to the mud. So if I get this right, black coated 6-foot fence perimeter on the north side, east side, west side. But no fencing is actually required on the south side. And if it's not required, you'd rather not put it in.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
question for staff regarding subdivisions that eventually go in there. For their fencing out front, if they wanted a fence, it would have to be the split rail, but in backyard, side yards, can they go a 6-foot cedar? Or is it going to be split rail? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what this applies to and what that looks like as it develops over time.
Mr. Mayor, Council, this is honestly the first application I've had in the Fields Area Plan. So, that's what the plan calls for. I think it's mainly the feel you get from the streets and walking, of the area. I think the 6-foot solid fence would be appropriate in rear yards. But I think from the street, we're just trying to attain that design feel.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman
Yeah, and that's what I think we want, a look, a feel, an aesthetic for this area, and having it out front, adds to that. I'm looking at, Rocky Mountain and Meridian High School. Along Linder, Meridian doesn't start the fence to the high school, but then it goes all around the perimeter of all their fields and everything. You get that, and Lieutenant Harper said, it's a safety thing, and having that back there, because that's kind of the back lot, if you will, and having a split rail up front to kind of be part of the neighborhood might be a good look, but I understand the need for that. And powder coated is better than the regular chain link. So that's a nice touch to have for a safety fence. So I'm okay with that approach.
Council, additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
the other comment that sounded maybe unresolved was the construction of the half roadway to the northern field boundary versus the northern property boundary. Is that issue? It's the norm standard requirement would be to do it to the northern property boundary, but there's an ask to do something different. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Burton.
And if that's the case, then the full street width north of the school property gets built by the property that develops ultimately to the west. They get the whole thing?
Mr. Mayor, if I can follow up on that. I think that's what the Planning and Zoning Commission also struggled with. And I mean, and we understand that, is that down the road, who will be building this full section of roadway, the school does not have any intention of getting rid of this parcel right now, or this 20 acres. So the intent would be that eventually Coal Valley would be building their portion of that roadway when, you know, this additional 20 acres was built. But, you know, obviously that whole discussion is what the Planning and Zoning Commission also struggled with.
I see. So if I could, Mayor, follow up on that. Amber, is the idea that Coal Valley's obligation to construct the half road width north of the athletic fields remains an obligation of Coal Valley, but the timing of doing that isn't until the northern site develops?
That's what we're requesting.
Okay. It looks like it's a cul-de-sac, it's a dead end?
Correct. Right now, it's a road that would go nowhere.
Okay. All right. Mr. Mayor, the reason for my question was I thought I had heard the ask being that it never be an obligation of Coal Valley to construct that half north of the field, but you're saying you just don't think it's necessary until the northern site develops, at which point Coal Valley would then construct its half?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Council, any additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
One more, and that's timing for the phases. What are you looking at for a timeline for things to start? I know it's always fluid depending on funding, but
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, great question. Right now, we're intending on, after the irrigation season is over this summer, we'll be on site, piping the crease and lateral, which basically bisects east to west the parcel. That work has to happen first. And we've already gone through our approvals with the irrigation district to secure all of that. So once the irrigation season is over, we'll be on site to do that. Best case scenario, once we move through this process with the city, we're currently working on our design documents. We would be submitting those to the city after the new year. So in 24, they would go in for plan review. Best case scenario, we would be following up on in earnest on the site spring of 24.
All right. Do we have anyone sign up?
Mr. Mayor, we do not.
Okay. Is there anybody else present who'd like to provide testimony on this item at this time, either in the room or online? I see nobody coming forward or raising their hand. So you can invite the applicant back up for final comments, or if council wants to talk for themselves for a second, and then we can go from there. All right, the applicant's coming back up for final comments and to stand present for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have no other additional comments and just appreciate your time.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
knew I made a note on one other question. Early in the presentation, it was talked about that you were going to try to do a 5-foot wide detached sidewalks along McMillan, but the staff recommendation was, what fits with our city pathways, was a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway required along McMillan. Were you in agreement with that?
Yeah, the 10-foot is what we have currently shown.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
with the discussion that's happened, Sonia, does staff have any areas where there's either confusion or inconsistency in what final conditions might be?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, Council, not at this time, no.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Question for staff. Sonia, you had mentioned this was early in the presentation on some of the history and the boundary adjustment. And you had mentioned something about the final approval, boundary adjustments required prior to council approval of the annexation ordinance. So how does this process work? If we're looking to approve this and with the variations of conditions and whatnot, are we not annexing at this point in time? Or we annex, but it won't take effect until after that final approval of boundary adjustment?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Hoagland, Council, you may go ahead and approve the application tonight if that's your decision. The findings would come back for approval approximately 2 weeks later, as is typical. But the annexation ordinance usually follows with the development agreement, and that would be held up until that property boundary adjustment gets finalized.
Thanks for the clarification.
And then the annexation isn't a done deal until that annexation ordinance and DA is approved and recorded. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
on that point, a motion to approve an annexation would be contingent upon that future boundary adjustment being approved. Is that a condition in the DA that needs to be specified? So it's not merely a timing of waiting for the ordinance to get before council, but the actual, it's got a little nerdy and technical, but the actual annexation approval itself, I guess, has to be contingent on that boundary adjustment, doesn't it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, yes, the development agreement won't be acted on and approved by council until the annexation ordinance, and it's staff's recommendation that that property boundary adjustment be finalized at that time. I don't believe staff included a development agreement provision that be done because it wouldn't be necessary to have that in the development agreement because it would already be done by that time.
And again, just to ensure there's no snags, and maybe Mr. Neri can help out, is it, well, I'll just be quiet and listen to Mr. Neri.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Warden, I think as the findings reflect that the intent is what Sonia stated of the property boundary adjustment being completed prior to the action on the development agreement, then it doesn't need to be in the DA, but it should be in the findings.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Warden.
I don't have a question, but I'm going to throw out just a comment. I think this applicant has been a special part of our community for some time. So there's lots of options of where you probably explored to make this master plan be housed, and I think it's fantastic that it's in the city of Meridian. And you've clearly done a lot of really good heavy lifting to make this co-location super facility look beautiful and try and also address the critical needs of safety. I think the questions from the P&Z minutes seem to reflect some good valid concerns over traffic and how this might integrate into the Fields District. I think our staff has done that as well, and you've been pressed. But Amber, you've been involved in as many schools in this valley as anybody else. So I think it appears to be a reflection of really good work done by you and your team in conjunction with city staff. So I think it's a beautiful project. And I think the conditions as presented make good sense. That's my take on it.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Schrader.
Yeah, I echo those comments, and I think it's great for, the community to have another educational option, and this definitely provides that. I don't have heartburn over the split rail fencing, not being in the front. I think that's fine. Appreciate the safety factor and enclosing the athletic fields and so forth. Think it makes sense. And, if the roadway is not totally completed until phase 2, I think that's fine as well. So I don't have any issues.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, certainly, as long as the applicant works with we always talk about fire department because they're the ones that drive the big heavy trucks. You know, and if those trucks can go on it, we know police can go on it. So that's the main thing off of Owyhee Storm, making sure that's taken care of. I don't have any issues of them having to put in that dead end road north of the phase one, just because, you know, who knows? They might end up selling that for development purposes and that developer would put in that road as opposed to having them to put in a half and that sort of thing. So it kind of keeps it a cleaner project and process. So yeah, I think it's going to be it's exciting. I'm sure for the people who go to Coe Valley to have a school site with K through 12, that's unusual. It's kind of fun to see. I think that'll be very attractive and having gone to 7th grade and 9th grade where Coe Valley is now, yeah, it's time to have a new school, I think. So, because that was a long time ago just for me. So it's exciting.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Sonia.
I just like to clarify something for the record. I'm not sure if I'm understanding some of the comments correctly, but so the current development agreement provision requires the extension of ersatz and Owyhee Storm to the property boundaries, northern property boundary, not just the boundary of the school site. Gray area would be the property boundary at the north. That is what ACHD is requiring as well as staff in the staff report. If you do not require the extension of those streets to the north boundary as requested by the applicant, this will also not extend city services to the northern property boundary or streets or adjacent developers and adjacent properties. So just be aware of that if you do choose to go that route tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
Sonia, what I was looking at was that extension of Owyhee Storm stopping on the north side at the end of the phase one
Yes.
line. So you're saying it needs to go to the end of the gray to the north, or is phase one okay?
The staff's recommendation in the staff report is it goes to this is one property, one parcel. So staff is recommending that it go to the north boundary line of the gray area. If the school doesn't develop that area for quite some time, there will be no connectivity to adjacent parcels and no extension of services in that area if you don't require that. Again, as I stated, ACHD is requiring that. Well, consistent with their conditions.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Neri.
I guess to piggyback on what Sonia just said, without that, since it is one parcel, there is no boundary to build to. I mean, we would need to carve off that property separately to not have to extend it. Otherwise, it is required by code to go all the way to the end of the property.
Mr. Mayor, Sonia, that could be though part of phase two as they show here. It doesn't have to be in phase one. It's at some point.
Mr. Mayor, it is in phase two currently.
Correct.
They did revise their phasing plan. That wasn't initially what they proposed, but staff did ask them to revise the phasing plan to include those requirements. It's half a street section plus 12 feet is what ACHD is requiring, clear to the northern property boundary. The applicant did ask for the street buffer and walkways on those future development areas, the gray areas, to not be required at this time because they were concerned that with farming the property in the interim use that it would get messed up. So that is something that you should actually include in your motion tonight too, if you're okay with the applicant deferring construction of the street buffer and walkways on the gray areas.
Okay. Well, Mr. Mayor, just to think out loud then, well, if they have to require that and they end up selling it, that they just improve the property and they get a higher price. So I guess that might one way to look at it, but it is extra cost, right? In phase two, but if that's what's needed to extend amenities and whatnot, and ACHD requires it, that kind of does limit our options a little bit.
Well, I guess it goes back to the question, not to delay, but could they come back and split the property and not annex that portion in. That's an option if you don't want to build it. I just don't know how it would impact your timing.
Mr. Mayor, just to
Councilman Hoagland.
further then, though I'm fine with them not putting in the sidewalks and those items because that would have impact for agricultural operations out there. So that part I'm fine with. Can't get the other, we'll get that.
Is it the sidewalk or the landscape buffers? Because so ACHD is okay if they don't put in the sidewalks?
Mr. Mayor, Council, I'm unsure if ACHD is okay with that. I believe they're requiring it, but I'm not positive without looking. I would imagine they're requiring the improvements. That's typical.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
in light of Sonia's information on city services being extended, and that's pretty important. I'm okay with the walkways not going in, buffer not going in, but I think we have to have that half roadway go in to connect city services.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Again, if these are just standard conditions in any development, if the buffer and sidewalk on this annexed property don't go in, what is the future trigger that requires the installation?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Borton, Council, it would be with future development of the those areas, the two gray areas shown on the phasing plan.
Okay. So it's a deferred obligation to install those improvements, not a waiver of them.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Good, thanks. And I agree, it makes sense in the interim, in the short period, in light of the agricultural operations, if there's a means to, no need to waste funds if they might get removed when those operations end, but certainly to preserve the commitment that the buffer and pedestrian connectivity goes in with any redevelopment is critical.
Oh, hey, I'm back, you guys. Sorry about that. Had a technical issue.
We left it all in your hands to make the motion, so pay no attention to what you didn't hear. Yeah, so Mr. Neri, if it's in our code, is it our code or ACHD's code? I'm confused on the street requirement to extend. I understand services. I didn't know roads and I don't know sidewalks, if that's part of whose code. Because I don't think that we can do something that waives our code if our code says roads and sidewalks. But
and Sonia, correct me. So our code requires you annex your entire parcel. So if that's not severed, it's not a separate piece. They have to annex all of it. Then the requirement for the road, I thought was both ours and ACHD, but I could be wrong. That you have to build the adjacent road. And I think here it's just the half plus 12, I think is the northern part, if I'm correct. But I thought that was our code in ACHD, but it might just be ACHD. I can't recall this moment.
I just want to know what is obligated under the code for people to be built. So we're not waiving something that we shouldn't be waiving if council desires to do so.
Well, normally, we do require by code that they extend services all the way to the edge of their property. And that's normally through the road.
To my knowledge, the road includes sidewalk, but I don't just want to be clear for the applicant.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, the services are required to be provided to and through properties so that other properties adjacent to them can extend it to their properties for development. Unless a property is being subdivided, we look at one parcel as one parcel for development purposes and require improvements accordingly. So if they were subdividing the property and phasing it, then we would allow those improvements to be constructed with the phase that they're associated with. But the difference is this applicant is not proposing to subdivide the property.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I believe, I mean, we have certainly delayed with bonds for landscaping. I think they can trust for the sidewalk because they sometimes will wait on doing that because if they have to, again, construct more road later, they don't want to have to move the sidewalk or rip it up. Same thing with the landscaping. So I think we can work with the landscaping and sidewalk if the council is comfortable with that. But we definitely want to make sure the service is extended. And if ACAC is requiring the roadway, then they're going to have to build the road.
Yeah, my guess is the roadway includes the sidewalk. I've never seen half a road built without the sidewalk on one side of it.
True.
Personally, I mean, I look at there were half roads that were in my subdivision that was required.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman
I
Hoagland.
was just gonna say though, but with an active agricultural activity that, you know, and if that takes away, say, a ditch or something like that, now you've got vacant land that's not under production. To me, that's just we're just wasting resources here. So,
I'm just going to the, whatever what I think is the question is, what does ACH define as a half plus 12? If ACHD is fine with that not occurring, but I don't, if council is considering waiving something that ACHD requires as half plus 12, that's really my question is in that regards.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
As we have a little bit of time to think through this. Concerns me now is we approve that they build just a half roadway and they don't build the walkways in the buffer. And then we do get a development to the north that is going to be walking down a sidewalk that doesn't exist because we waive that tonight. And I don't think any of us want to have anyone walking in an area where we have allowed them not to build a sidewalk.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Schrader.
a question for staff. I mean, if the applicant really doesn't want to complete it, how difficult would it be for them to subdivide the property as, you know, a way to tackle that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Strader, council, they would have to submit a preliminary plat application or some version of that short plat. It meets applicability.
I'm kind of looking at the applicant to see what you've heard options. What's a better, less option or more expensive, worse option? I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. It was discussed early on in this process on whether or not we were going to divide out that 20 acres. And the Coal Valley Administration Board did not want to do that. They wanted to keep the parcel intact. So that has complicated this whole discussion. I mean, I think if you know, obviously, if we're tied to what ACHD is going to require us to do, and the sidewalk is something that ACHD deems important, these are detached sidewalk requirements. The landscaping component is a big piece of it. We don't want to extend all this landscaping on this 20 acres and have to maintain it when the adjacent ground is going to be put into farming. So, you know, that's where it's your comment earlier, you know, putting resources that potentially could be destroyed. I mean, if it was a deferred requirement, I mean, maybe, you know, and I don't know, Mr. Neri, if there's a possibility of something like that, if adjacent parcels start to develop, but it really does come down to just a practical nature of not wanting to build this infrastructure and have to take care of it when you've got a farmer out there growing crop on it. We do not want to subdivide this out as was suggested. It's not the direction that the board wanted to take. It would certainly stop this process that we're in right now and delay things.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
good question then. And maybe also for legal. Is there a way to allow just the road to be built, city services to be extended? And we don't require walkways and landscape buffer, but in some form of a deferral, that if any of the properties that we now connect with to the north develop, that it automatically triggers, they've got to go in and build the sidewalks to connect. Are we reaching too far?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Overton. Yeah, I mean, it's just the mechanics of doing that. You know, I mean, I'm just looking at an aerial map of the area and there's a significant amount of land north of this property. So I don't know what or when something's going to connect to it. So I think that's the concern is you've got 20 acres with this gap that may remain in the ownership of Coal Valley and not get developed for 10 years. And the immediate parcel to the north of that gets developed 2 years from now. And then you have this gap. I'm not worried about the landscaping. I know we've dealt with landscaping on other occasions. We have bonded for landscaping because it's the winter, it's not available or whatever. So the landscaping, I don't think is as big a hurdle. It's the sidewalk. And I think what I heard Ms. Van Acker say the concern was, is there a concern in accessing the property with a driveway access for farm vehicles? Is that the concern?
Correct.
Yeah.
And just everything associated with an agricultural use. And, you know, he'll still be irrigating this 20 acres off of a ditch, you know, now water's running all over the place that we can't control. I mean, I think it kind of snowballs on us a little bit. The landscape, I completely agree. If there was a way that could be bonded for later, I just think that it would be very, very difficult to maintain. And it's a
Mr. Members of Council, I don't know if Sonia can think of a solution with ACHD. I know they've done trusts for sidewalks and bridges and things like that. But I don't know if the trigger like Councilman Over comes up is something we can deal with from a development agreement standpoint. I mean, we can put the words in and somebody still has to go back and tell somebody go build a sidewalk and get it done because the property to the north wants to develop now.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I did have a chance to review the ACHD report and it does require half plus 12 of the street extensions along with curb gutter and sidewalk. I'm not sure if ACHD, they may be amenable to accepting some kind of surety or bond for those improvements. That would be something that the applicant would have to work out with ACHD. You know, I know the city in the past has handled these kind of situations through a development agreement, either deferral of the improvements. I know at times the council has not required the landscaping within the street buffer, but has required the sidewalk, especially near schools, for safe access to schools. Another option might be a temporary asphalt pathway.
That's what I was going to just suggest. We did that at the intersection of Victory and Locust Grove, and I'm just hopeful that they're pulling out that asphalt pathway and putting in sidewalks because it's met a need and doesn't have the same impacts. You know, just if it could be a temporary asphalt pathway next to the curb and then replaced eventually with something else in the future when the property's developed. That's what, again, it sounds like those are ACHD conversations. If council's okay with that type of a consideration.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Borton.
Good conversation, short of us staring at each other, trying to figure this out. It seems like a discussion of legal staff and the applicant and ACHD needs to happen to articulate what that would look like.
Or to go back with their board.
Yeah. this is really extremely unique in the sense, I think, of annexing property without, design and a plat and anything that indicates what's going to be on this northern parcel. That's not very common. I understand the ask, but
Mr. Neri.
Members of the council, I guess in the same conversation, Councilman Borton, I mean, I know what the Planning and Zoning Commission wrestled with a lot on this was the timing. And I don't know what the timing for Coal Valley is for this, because technically they're asking for an approval tonight, and I don't know how long the property boundary adjustment is going to take to get finalized. But nothing's going to happen until that happens with the city. So we won't be annexing it. We won't be signing a development agreement. So since there's a built-in delay, but that's still having to happen, in my opinion, you don't have to approve anything tonight. We can maybe get some of the answers to these questions before we bring it back in a month or so with a better answer to the access issue and the available use of that. Because in my opinion, I mean, the property north of this with two large schools out in this area are going to be ripe for someone to want to develop it at some point in the next 3 to 5 years. So, I mean, this is certainly going to come up soon, and we could maybe come up with a solution between now and a month from now. But I don't know the timing that Coal Valley has.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we prefer that you act on this application tonight. And if that means, requiring us to do what ACHD is requiring us to do on these roadways, we would prefer to move forward. I would rather approach ACHD with your approval. If there is some other option on the sidewalk, for example, rather than waiting for them. It took us a long time to get to this point with ACHD, and I would not want to necessarily revisit that and delay your decision this evening.
Okay, so council,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, and to Amber's point, I can see why they want to move forward, but I was just trying to think, is there a way we can craft this that says, hey, we're okay with a temporary path? And if ACHD agrees to it, that's fine. Or if there's something, whatever ACHD gives to them, we're fine with that. But I don't know how you craft that, saying, yes, at a certain point in time, we want landscaping, we want sidewalk. But if ACHD is willing to waive or alter or delay those types of things, then we'd be fine with that. So I don't know, Mr. Neri, if there's a way to say, hey, if they require it all, that's what's going to happen. But if they do something different, we can go along with that.
So, yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Hoagland, I think our standard condition is to follow all the requirements of ACHD. So if they do work out with ACHD, temporary, a bond, something else, all our conditions requires just to meet whatever they require. Same thing with the landscaping. We always require landscaping. We do allow for bonding for periods of time to not put it in. And they usually work that at a staff level. So I think the standard conditions I think are applicable or adequate. But
Mr. Mayor, if I could chime in on that, there is no standard condition that says to comply with ACHD requirements. Maybe there should be, that there's not. They kind of, I think the most restrictive applies between the two agencies. And along with the development improvements for the entire site, those are required with development unless otherwise specified in the development agreement. So if it is your wish to allow those improvements to be deferred, please state that in your mention and in your motion, and we will include that in the development agreement just to ensure there's no issues down the line. Thank you.
yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would simply, if we're going to add that, I would simply say to allow for the applicant and the city and other agencies to work on any potential deferrals or alternates and comply with those requirements. So that way we don't know what they're going to be. We don't know what it is, but we just want to make sure whatever either we allow or the ACHD allows, that they're required to do that.
Mr. Mayor, I guess
Councilman Hoagland.
find out from Amber, are we good with that approach from your perspective?
Yeah, we would agree to that.
Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
move that we close the public hearing on H 2023-0011.
Second.
I have a motion, a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed, nay. Guys have it, and the public hearing is closed.
I didn't want to make the motion to close public hearing because usually then you follow up with a motion. And I don't think my notes are good enough to capture everything on this thing. But
Does that mean I get to make the motion tonight?
yeah.
Oh, I can't.
Only if we tie. There's 4 of us. I don't think there's going to be a timer.
That's breaking the, but I was like making the motion. One of these days I'm going to make a motion.
Well, let me give it a go.
Councilman
And,
Hoagland.
certainly, we've done this before. We work through it and make it happen. So, Mr. Mayor, after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H 2023-0011 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of July 11th, 2023. And that would also include that the issue of the final approval of the property boundary adjustments required prior to council approval of the annexation ordinance as we discussed for the DA. It would also include that I haven't formulated my thought on how to word this, but the fact that we are willing to waive the inclusion or the construction of sidewalk and landscaping until such time the northern property is developed. But however, applicant will comply with all ACHD requirements for that street and sidewalk and other amenities as they require. That was a bad way of saying it, but I think you understand my gist. So what else am I missing?
Does the maker of the motion wish to add allowing the black coated chain link fence on north, south, and east?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Overton. I did. That it also be allowed to include the black chain link fencing around the north, east, and west portions of the property as they have indicated in their application.
Second.
Mr. Mayor, clarification of the motion, please.
Motion and a second, and staff for question.
Did you intend to not require a fence as proposed by the applicant along McMillan Road, the split rail fence? As is, they proposed it, so it's a requirement. If you're okay with removal of that, we can allow for that. If not, it can stay. Thanks.
I'm on the fence about that one, though. I mean, it's, I don't know what's going to develop out front. I mean, they do have one portion of it that's going to be at the corner there or stat. Everything else, if that's developed or stays in that farm property, it's not going to be seen, but if they proposed it and want to continue with fencing, then it would be required. How's that for getting around things? Yeah, getting that look from Tanya, so. Tanya, I don't know, council, let's have for a little discussion about that, because I really am, I don't, there's part of me that says, hey, this is what we're doing in the Fields District. We're trying to create this atmosphere, if you will. So why not? They're going to be part of that community of what we call the Fields District. So let's try to blend that in or tie it in with the signage and everything else that's doing. So that's kind of where a part of me falls into. It's not going to be as expensive, I think, as chain link. I don't know. But council members, what?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Schrader.
I think if we're gonna require something, we should just try to make it cohesive. I'm like concerned that we're gonna just require split rail fencing, but we're gonna get like 4 different versions of it throughout the Fields District. And it's not all gonna look the same. So I just think whatever we do, if we do it, should all be like really specific. I have a different concern, which is I keep getting hung up that we're open to not requiring like the sidewalk and the roadway improvements if ACHD basically agrees to some alternative. Like I'm okay putting the landscaping, I think, in a bond or something like that, but I'm kind of struggling with like the school has the ability to subdivide the property and they're choosing not to. And that is within their control then to avoid those improvements. So I'm just sort of having a hard time being open to making an exception.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr.
Council, I would suggest instead of the word waive, which always has a really bad connotation, is that we just allow deferral. And deferral is done fairly often, but it's not deferral for 10 years. Generally, it's going to be a deferral for a period of time. But I think that's what the tenor of the conversation was, more of a deferral to a future point. I think the concern we have that I don't have an answer for is when the immediately property to the north begins to develop and this one hasn't, you're going to want a sidewalk to connect it. And so it's going to have to get done. So I don't know how the deferral works with ACHD, but we could work through that.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
The agreement of the second on that, I would like to substitute deferral for waiver. That is a much better word. Because
Second agrees.
not going to waive it in perpetuity. We're just deferring them doing it at this point in time.
Motion maker and the second agrees, so we'll do so. You know, I know you didn't ask for my opinion on the fence, but it's not required. And that's what I'm like, there's no fence requirement ever on a property. And so I don't know why would we require a fence? I understand if they want to build it, meet the areas, but should there be a requirement? We don't require people to fence subdivisions, do we? Just the perimeter. So I guess if that was to become something else, it would require to be fenced in that manner. But if it's not, that's going to be a real interesting when we may have to rethink if split rail is what we're going for. I just don't see homeowners wanting split rail fences in their yards, but that's just me.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Sonia.
Not to correct Mr. Neri, but we do not require perimeter fencing around subdivisions. We do require fencing around common open space areas to delineate private from common areas. Before your motion's done, would you please clarify? I heard you say waive and not defer. I wasn't sure if you're referring to the fencing, the split rail fencing, or the landscape buffer along the northern portion of the future development area.
Mr. Mayor, Sonia, it was related to the sidewalk and landscaping.
So you want to waive that requirement?
No, that is deferred. I wanted to substitute the word deferral according to Mr. Neri had a better alternative. Instead of waive, it was defer. So, and the second agreed, so we're good. And as to the fencing, yeah, I keep going back and forth on that. So I would not include requiring fence, the split rail fencing in my motion. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Wharton.
for clarification on when the reference is made for a deferral of the landscape buffer and the sidewalk on the property to the north, or until that develops, are you talking about the 23 acre northern portion of this application when that develops? Or the property north of this entire annexed area? What do you mean by property to the north?
And Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Hoagland.
Councilman Borton, my motion would be for the property that is under their control. The sticking point I have is if we do talk, and I know that's an idea that, okay, if something across the road develops, then that would trigger their effort. But what does develop mean and how many? Is it, 3 homes that decide to build right away? Usually it's going to be a big development and when they start building, does that trigger it? It does, as Mr. Neri pointed out, it gets a little sticky in there. How do you define this? How do you do that? We do want schools to be walkable. So if people are living there to the north, we want to have that access point, a safe access point. If there's a way to come up with what is that trigger and what does that development mean at what point in time, that then they have to move forward. And I'm fine with that because I get that aspect of it and it is a safety issue. So, but originally, Mr. Borton, I was thinking of just that particular property because they might sell that to a developer who wants to develop it right away. They can put in the sidewalk. That's going to be part of the requirement. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I apologize. I'm not tracking. Does the phrase property to the north mean the 23 acres that is part of today's annexation? Or does it mean something outside of today?
Mr. Mayor and Councilman Borton, my motion was with the 23 acres in mind only.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
And I'm open to if someone wants to say, hey, no, if we define it this way, if something across the road, well, it's going nowhere right now. If there's development that starts occurring, that would be the trigger to require them to do that. That would be fine, but how do we do that? It's a little murky in my mind. So I can only control this particular area in this application.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, I am.
Councilman Hoagland, yeah, unless you require surety to be submitted for those improvements, there's no way for us to go and get them later if the property to the north of the subject property develops. And we typically aren't in the habit of holding surety for extended periods of time. So I'd recommend if you want those improvements to be constructed at this time that you require them. A possible solution for farm access to the property would be to leave a driveway open so they wouldn't be destroying the sidewalk. And then when that northern portion of the subject property redevelops, then they could complete that section that's missing. Suggestion, thank you. The property to the north, just an added thing, say to the north, the northern portion of the property is, I believe it's
We can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
sorry, the northern portion of this property, just for clarification of the record, is 19.6 acres. The approximate 23 acre reference actually included that southern future development portion. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Borton.
I'm comfortable certainly with the approval motion. And for me, I hear this portion of a condition of approval state that the sidewalk and landscaping improvement on this 19-ish acres within the subject parcel, the northern part, can be deferred until the earlier of the development of this 19 acres, which is the northern part of the subject process property, or the development of the property immediately adjacent on the northern portion of this subject property. And that staff create and articulate some condition that ensures when either of those two events, the first of those two events were to occur, that this applicant's obligation that has been deferred is triggered. And if a driveway is an interim, a driveway into that northern portion of this subject property is an interim remedy to allow that to occur, seems wholly appropriate.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Sonia.
unless we require surety for those improvements, there's no way that we can get those in the future.
Mr.
With
Member,
the
I was going to
budding
suggest that.
property to the north developing.
Yeah, the only way that would could trigger us to be able to enforce that would be require a surety bond for those improvements and put with those two conditions.
And like I stated, we typically don't hold sureties for an extended period of time.
It's normally a year and we can renew them, but I mean, we don't like to hold them for much longer than a year or
I
two.
think ACHD, I think this was mentioned earlier, may be able to do it through a road trust or something similar, but I can't speak for them, so. Like the sidewalk, for instance.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I don't know how else, I don't know how else you proceed on this without solving that problem. And if it's something that can't be done, we're back to the start of this. In my mind.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the question about taking 2 weeks to go and try to solve these issues. They don't seem, I know they don't seem little, but they're big, but they are. And time to get this right is very important to the city. It's very important to the school. And I would hate for us to say one thing, think we got it, and who knows what type of obligations or challenges we put on somebody somewhere through this process. I don't think we're far off, but I think it's just work that doesn't work well trying to solve things from the dais when you really need to work with another agency to get a solution. But we do have a motion.
Mr. Mayor.
And I'm just not sure where the motion would go based upon, or where the votes will fall on the motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
Yeah, I like Councilman Borton's discussion points of earlier of development, the northern portion, earlier of development of 19, whatever is earlier, the development of the 19.6 acres or development to the adjacent northern property, the deferral is triggered. But I guess it does come down to, that road trust. If they're able to do the road trust, that we can require that, but that's what we don't know if that's doable. Now, how long will ACHD take to discuss that? Is that a staff level discussion where they can have that and go, yes, we would accept a road trust and do that? And, but I'll stop talking and see what we might have for solution wise.
Mr. Mayor, Council, the applicant just relayed to me that the school is willing to go ahead and construct the sidewalk and the buffer on the northern portion of the subject property.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Hoagland.
I would strike from my motion any reference or requirement regarding any deferral, waiver, or other items related to the landscaping and sidewalk requirement for that northern 19.6 acres.
Second agrees.
Second agrees. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, another clarification, please.
Sonia.
I don't believe we ever got a final answer on the split rail fencing along McMillan Road, whether that's required or
It is not.
if you were leaving it open for the applicant to not do it if they don't wish to.
We can leave it open to the applicant to do it or not. We're not going to require, we will not require it from the city.
If that's part of the motion. Does the second agree? So there we have our Can you want to repeat your entire? I'm kidding. Is there further discussion or questions for clarification from council or staff? If not, clerk call the roll.
Strater,
Aye.
Overton,
Aye.
Borton,
Aye.
Hoagland,
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Congratulations, and we look forward to seeing it move forward. With that, move on to item 4. Do we need to open this or a motion satisfy?
A motion satisfies.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Hoagland.
just for the record, the developer, the applicant in this case, Costco Development under H 2023-007 has requested and sent a letter requesting withdrawal of this application for the development agreement modification. And I just wanted to note in the letter that they sent for the request, I thought they heard the neighbors, they understood the issue, and we appreciate that willingness to not only withdraw the application based on the testimony, but also they've committed in this letter to enact the following operational improvements at the site. Just to read it into record, that no trucks will be allowed to travel behind the Costco store except emergency vehicles and public service vehicles. Wayfinding signs will be installed to guide trucks to the approved delivery route. Education reinforcement of required truck routes will be provided to the drivers. And Costco will work with city staff to replace the small no truck sign at North 10 Mile Road and West Lost Rapids Drive with a larger, more conspicuous sign. So just my motion, just to make sure that is into the record, and we do appreciate that effort and being good neighbors for that area. So I make that motion that the withdrawal be granted.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to withdraw the application. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. You guys have it, and the application has been withdrawn. Council, anything under future meeting topics? Or do we need to vacate item 5?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we vacate item 5.
I have a motion second to vacate item 5. Is there any discussion? Not all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. You guys have it. And we are at the last item on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. You guys have it. We are adjourned.
Have a good night.